Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our webinar this morning. We're talking about the inclusiveness of standardization this morning. The speakers of today will talk about enhancing the involvement of all societal stakeholders and small and medium enterprises in the standard development process. My name is Els, and I will be moderating the webinar in the background. As usual, all attendees are muted during the presentations. But you can use the Q&A panel to submit your questions, of course. The speakers will have a look at the questions after the presentation, sorry. Should your question remain unreplied, please don't worry, because we plan to make a Q&A report available via our website. We are also recording the webinar, so you will receive the link to the recording and the presentation in your inbox later today. I'm happy to let you know as well that we are organizing this webinar in coordination with ANEC, the Consumer Voice and Standardization, and that we have both my colleague Deborah Wautier and Chiara Giovanni of ANEC connected today. So please, ladies, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Els, and thank you, Chiara, for joining us today. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today, if you see the agenda, the next slide, you will see that we will start by covering the principle of inclusiveness, so what it means and how it's embedded in the CEN and CENELEC system. Then we'll really deep dive into the so-called Annex III organizations. First, of course, we'll uncover what is hiding behind that denomination. So who are those organizations? Who do they represent and what do they do? And we have the chance today to have Chiara, which will present in more details ANEC, which is one of the so-called Annex III organizations. Then we'll go into more details on the value that those organizations bring to our system, how they participate, and so we'll go over their rights and obligations within the CEN and CENELEC technical activities, but also you'll learn that they also participate beyond the technical work, and they also participate in strategic activities within our system. We'll particularly go into details to present the opinion mechanism, which was granted to some of the Annex III organizations, how it functions, and maybe more importantly, how you as experts within CEN and CENELEC TCs interact with the mechanism. And then we'll end with some general guidance on how to ensure that the technical committees, the working groups, and any standard development environments and processes reinforce the inclusiveness value of CEN and CENELEC. So without further ado, let's start. By now, you might all be very familiar with the CEN-CENELEC Strategy 2030, which identify 5 goals for us to focus on and work towards throughout the decade. Now we only have a couple of years left. The uniqueness of the European Standardization System is really its openness and inclusiveness. And CEN and CENELEC community is very much dedicated to be a key driver of this machine. That's why it's very much reflected in our strategy, particularly in goal 3 and 4. Together with our members, we're fully committed to encouraging and supporting all sectors of society and industry to participate in our standardization work. And we're committed to cooperating with key organizations for the development of sound partnerships with those that can contribute to the fulfillment of the scope and mission of both CEN and CENELEC. So for these partnerships at European level, we very much consider the complementarity roles that organizations can play at either national or European level. That's why we at CEN and CENELEC have built strong and long-lasting partnerships with the so-called Annex III organizations, among others, which you can see on the screen there as a little sneak peek. And the commitment of CEN and CENELEC and of our members is, of course, further reinforced by the European Regulation 1025 2012, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, as well as the more recent European Standardization Strategy that came out in 2022, and the high-level forum that was created following that strategy, etc., etc. But so what is the term Annex III organizations? In the next slide, I'm giving you an extract from the European Regulation 1025, which is the European Standardization System regulation that was published in 2012. in that regulation, there are 4 stakeholders that have been identified, which are representatives of consumers, workers, environmental NGOs, as well as SMEs. The regulation ensures that the views of those societal stakeholders and SMEs are very much represented by experts in the standard making process at European level, and thus further brings balance to the European standardization system, where the voice of civil society and SMEs are commonly weaker at national level. So it's really this complementarity mindset. And the 4 European organizations that represent each stakeholder in the system are actually mentioned in the Annex #3 of that regulation. Hence, this is why we as standardizers refer to those 4 organizations as Annex IIIs. And in the next slide, we can see more in detail which are those 4 organizations. So first you have the 3 societal stakeholders. ANEC with us today represent consumers. ECOS represents environmental interest. ETUC representing workers and trade unions. And the 4th one, and not the least, is SBS, Small Business Standards, representing SMEs. We keep on repeating this complementary idea because, of course, the participation of societal stakeholders and of SMEs remains to be, the main channel remains to be at national level. Of course, participating at national level gives those representatives and those experts advantages. For example, they have access to the information in their own languages. It doesn't require to travel that far if you're remaining at national level. However, the work of the 4 Annex III organizations at European level is very much there to work in parallel. So we're very happy to have this double system in place. In our next slide, you'll see how we actually cooperate with those 4 Annex III organizations. The 4 of them have actually signed partnership agreements with CEN and CENELEC, except for ETUC, which has signed only a partnership with CEN. They are recognized as partners category 1 in the system, as defined in CEN-CENELEC Guide 25, which you see in front of you. And those partner category 1 are referred to many times in many documents that you might be familiar with, such as our internal regulations, several terms of references of technical groups, etc., etc. So the Annex III organizations in partnership with us have the exact same right as any other partners of category 1, as well as some extra rights because of their specific status, which we'll go into details in a second. But the basis of those partnerships is really the duality of areas of cooperation. So they will provide input both at technical level. So you will see them participating in TCs, subcommittees, working groups. Also, they have representatives at our technical boards, but also they participate in governing bodies and its strategic discussions, such as our joint policy groups. They are also invited to our general assemblies that are currently happening in Amsterdam, etc., etc. But more about this in a second. For now, I will give the floor to Chiara, who will present one of the Annex III organizations.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Chiara Giovannini. I am the Deputy Director General of ANEC. I'm very pleased to be with you today. Thank you very much to CEN and CENELEC for inviting ANEC. So who is ANEC? ANEC is the association representing consumers in standardization. Our role is to coordinate the representation of consumers. We are going to be 30 next year, and our main job is to represent, defend consumers, and to provide a counterpoint to the positions of industry. Next slide, please. We do represent consumers in standardization, both at the European and at the international level, but we also focus on the continuum of consumer protection and welfare. So we contribute to the development and revision of European policies and laws, and we also focus on the use of standards, which is the conformity assessment, accreditation, and market surveillance. We are active in a quite high number of CENELEC and ETSI technical bodies, but also in ISO-IC. And as you can see, we are quite productive in terms of attendance of meetings and contributions to the standardization work. Next. You can have more information about ANEC on our website, where we have different information on the on what we do, on some specific priorities, and we try to communicate about standardization in a simple way. Next. We are an independent, private, and not-for-profit association. We are established in Belgium, so we are a so-called NGO, non-governmental organization. Our membership is mirroring the CENELEC membership in terms of countries. We have national consumer organizations in each country, nominating one representative in our General Assembly. For the time being, we are missing the nomination of some countries, but this is also something that will be on a rolling basis, because there will be new nominations. Our funding is coming from the European Union and the EFTA Secretariat. As Deborah mentioned, the funding of the so-called Annex III organizations is foreseen in the standardization regulation. The priorities that we cover are the consumer's priorities. As a consumer, you know, you have to deal with a lot of things. We need to set priorities, but our main areas of work are accessibility, child safety, domestic appliances, digital society, traffic and mobility, services, and sustainability. Again, those are the main headlines. Under each priority, we have specific work items, and you know that standards are more and more used in European policies and legislation. So under each heading, we have a lot of activities going on. Next. ANEC, as Deborah mentioned, is a partner organization of CENELEC. We are full members of ETSI. We are also observers in ISO-COPOLCO. ISO-COPOLCO is the Consumer Policy Committee of ISO, and we are members of many expert groups of the European Commission. Why is that? Because, as mentioned, we contribute to the policy development, and as you know, the standards, the harmonized standards, are linked to legislation, and we participate in the expert group about those legislations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chiara. Very clear. And now this slide is here to complement the numbers from ANEC. So you have a quick idea of the participation of all 4 Annex III partners in and CENELEC technical work. Those numbers were extracted from Q1 of this year, and they include participation in TCs, subcommittees, working groups, joint technical committees, as well as miscellaneous groups such as sector fora, coordination groups, etc., etc. So of course, you can notice that the participation of the 4 organizations vary in numbers, but that is very much depending on their own resources, of course, as well as the sectoral priorities. We heard the one from ANEC, and of course, they're not the same for ETUC, SBS, or ECOS. And again, I'm noting here that ETUC has quote unquote no partnership with CENELEC, so it looks like they're not participating in CENELEC work, but they're actually in a few joint technical committee which are reflected in the CEN numbers, so they are also involved at CENELEC level. In the next slide, now we'll finally go into details into the rights and obligations of those 4 organizations within CEN and CENELEC. So we really have put a lot of efforts to ensure their effective participation in the technical work. That's why they have dedicated tools and tailored mechanism at European level. As I said, their rights are the same as partners category 1 defined in Guide 25, which is what you see here, as well as some extra rights because of their specific status in the system. And those extra rights are mentioned in teal. I guess it's a teal color on the slide. So of course they have access to all working documents, but also as Annex IIIs, they've recently been granted access to all normative references as well to ensure that they can effectively participate in all the draft consultations. They can participate in any technical committee. The difference with any other liaison or partner is that here they have 0 restriction to participate. That means that they, as Annex III, they do not need a decision from the TC to be able to participate. As soon as they request to be added to a TC or a working group, it's granted by CENELEC. But then in terms of their participation within TC, they're an observer, just like any other partner or liaison. And in terms of working group level, they are expert as anybody else around the table in a working group. As partners, they can comment at inquiry level, but as Annex III organization, they can also comment at formal vote stage. So Annex III can comment at both stages, partners only one stage. Liaison, to be clear, do not have the right to comment. And finally, I will have to add a disclaimer, hence I've added a little asterisk, but some Annex III organizations have the right to submit an opinion on draft standards. I will go into more details in a second, but let me explain the asterisk here. I mentioned earlier that we have our administrative board meetings and our AG meeting, General Assembly meetings this week, and indeed on Tuesday, our administrative boards had their meeting and agreed to grant the right of opinion not only to the societal Annex III, which was the case since 2017, but also to extend it to SBS, which is the Annex III representing SMEs. So the slides only reflect the right for Annex III organizations that are societal stakeholders, because that has been the case since 2017 and until last Tuesday. But the asterisk is there to let you know, actually in the near future, you might see opinions submitted by SBS as well. That's normal. It's a very, very new right. So let's deep dive into it in the next slide. Again, it says societal Annex III, but you know that in the very near future, it will encompass all 4 Annex III organizations. So this right was granted in 2017, as I mentioned, as an additional right for the societal stakeholders on top of commenting, which is something that they already had. So it's really enabling those organizations to play a more central role in the standardization process, to raise their profile and to create a more distinct working relationship by deploying this so-called opinion mechanism. All in this in an effort to strengthen the effective participation of those stakeholders in standardization. So the Annex organizations were granted this right so that they can express their formal views on draft standards throughout the entire standards development process. So it's both an inquiry and formal vote, ensuring that their views are taken into consideration most appropriately. However, of course, if those Annex III organizations want to introduce changes to the text of the standard under development, they have to do so through the regular commenting process, of course. So those opinions are either favorable or not favorable, very simple. They are meant to be used positively. They are encouraged as Annex IIIs to submit opinions on drafts that they have already been actively participating in. And they're also encouraged to draft their opinion in a way that's constructive so that the TC can take the opinion on board easily. The opinion is not part of the ballot. It does not affect the outcome of the vote, nor does it affect the national delegation principle. So in the next slide, I'm giving you a little idea of how many opinions we've received since 2017 at its launch. And those numbers encompass all the opinions received until December 31st of December 2023. So 445 from those three societal stakeholders so far. As I said, they are mostly favorable. It's a strong majority, around 75% of all opinions submitted since the launch of the process. In most cases, comments had been already submitted at earlier standards development phases, either to the TC or to the working group. So again, SSOs, societal stakeholders, are actively participating in the development of the standard, in most cases when they provide an opinion. As far as the not favorable opinions are concerned, they are sometimes used to either reiterate a comment that had been submitted already, or maybe to express general concerns on the standard content. Maybe the standard is believed to be insufficiently developed, or they have noticed a change of scope, or they're using an opinion to inform on the impact of the standard on consumers, workers, or environment. And since we have a user of the opinion mechanism with us, I want to turn to you, Chiara, and ask you what was one recent opinion that ANEC has submitted, which TC was it for, and what aspect was ANEC particularly supporting or highlighting in it?
Thank you very much. As mentioned, ANEC is working on several priorities. Accessibility is one of them. We have several standards being developed for the training of assistant dogs, guide dogs for blind people, but also other kind of assistant dogs. The TC is DTC 452, and they are developing this series of standards in different parts. The standards have been out for inquiry and also formal vote lately. We were able to support them and to express very favorable opinions because we participate in the development of the standards. We have a collaboration with the European Guide Dogs Association, and we see the benefit of having harmonized rules on the training of assistive dogs that can enter public premises, that travel on planes, because they have been trained. This is an example of a favorable opinion that we submitted very recently, and because the standards are some of them at the inquiry phase, we will continue to do so for the formal vote.
Thank you so much, Chiara. And before I move on and deep dive into how the opinion mechanism will look like in terms of really how the opinion is received in the system and then shared with the TC, I saw a question that I will answer now because it is very confusing. Opinion and comments are sometimes confused. So let me reiterate that Annex III organizations as partners of CEN and CENELEC have the right to comment, submit comments on inquiry and formal vote stages. Those are the regular comments that you're used to, the comments that all experts and NSP experts in the TC can formulate as well. And I think that that's what the question is referring to, comments during the consultations that you're also mirroring at national level. The opinion mechanism, the opinion right, is something on top of the right to comment. It is an extra visibility, an extra way for Annex III organizations, societal stakeholders, and soon all of them to be able to express either a very favorable opinion on a draft versus a not favorable opinion. So on the one hand, for one draft, they can submit comments to help improve the draft and change it in very specific ways. And on the other hand, on top of this, they can also submit a more overarching opinion about the state of the draft as it is now. Be it we like how it's going, or actually we really dislike the way it's going. Please have a second look at it. So I hope I've answered to your question, Mathieu. Now we can deep dive into the next slide, how it looks like. So of course, because we're both CEN and CENELEC, we have two parallel mechanisms for both side of the system. A very detailed process is available on the CEN boss, and the link is on the slide here. What's particular for the SEN environment and quite new is that the mechanism has recently been digitalized. That was launched back in March 2024. That means that now societal stakeholders are able to submit their opinions directly on the e-balloting platform. They're filling in a template, an opinion template, and then they're submitting it directly online. As soon as it's online, everyone that has a voter role in that TC is able to see the submitted opinion, so it becomes visible immediately until the end of the opening of the ballot. Once the ballot closes, the opinion result table, which is a new table result, is now integrated into the results page that you are used to see. And we, as at CCMC, also attach the filled-in template of the opinion to the voting results zip file, which again, you're used to, and we also upload it on projects online. So that's the digitalized part. However, the role of the TC does not change. Indeed, the opinion needs to be considered together with all the comments submitted during inquiry, or if it was submitted at formal vote during the first occasion of the TC or the subcommittee, which will most likely be the next meeting. It's up to the TC or the subcommittee to decide on the follow-up to be given to the opinion, and especially if it's not favorable, you're expected to provide a feedback and to inform CCMC, so of course your dedicated project manager, of the decision you've taken. For the digitalized process, I'm not going to go too much into detail because we already have an available recorded training. So now I'm going to go to the CENELEC system. The CENELEC mechanism today is still the old ways. However, we are working on its digitalization, and the targeted deployment for the digitalized mechanism is Q1 of next year. In the meantime, we continue the email chain mechanism that we've used. So the societal stakeholder sends their completed opinion to CENELEC. We share it with the TC Secretary and Chair. It's up to the TC Secretary to upload the opinion to the CENELEC collaboration tool, and it's up to the TC Secretary to inform the TC for the consideration of the opinion. And again, now we're exactly the same as I've mentioned for SEN, which is that you need to decide on the follow-up of the opinion, especially if it's not favorable. You need to consider the opinion together with all the submitted comments if it was submitted for an inquiry phase, and if it was submitted at the formal vote phase, you need to consider it at the first occasion that the TC has, which is most likely your next meeting. Once you've agreed on the follow-up to be given, you have to inform CCMC, again, your project manager. And we as CCMC also provide a annual update to the technical boards on all of the opinions and how they are processed. And moving on to this, before we move on, I also wanted to quickly highlight this important Guide 17 that is already well known and at your disposal for you to use. We commonly call it the SME Standardization Guide. We will actually hold a dedicated webinar on this guide, deep diving into each section in November, and recording already exists, but it's still an important tool for ensuring the inclusiveness of particularly SMEs needs in the drafting process. So I still wanted to highlight it. The guide exists in 27 languages. It's free to download on our website. There's an easy to use checklist at the end to kind of test if your standard is SME compatible. And actually SBS, so Small Business Standard, has created an online SME compatibility test based on this guide and on the checklist to make sure that your standard is SME compatible. So make sure to make use of it. And now moving on to the next part of our presentation, I think that the participation of various stakeholders bring a very positive impact to our system. Of course, right now, I've just described a lot of nitty-gritty on how the opinion mechanism work and how much you as TC Secretary or experts, you need to consider them, and maybe that might impact your work on top of all the other rules, because the more we are to reach consensus, the more difficult it can look. However, as standards makers, our ultimate objective is to provide tools that ensure products and services are safe for all citizens and users. We know that the more diverse the people around the table, the higher the quality of our end deliverables. Higher quality, what does that mean? It means standards that benefit everyone equally, standards that are inclusive of all specificities and needs, and an inclusive standard ensures that the product or the service benefits all users equally. Indeed, the more diverse the input you receive, the more needs and concerns are represented in your TC for consumers, for accessibility matters, for SME users, etc., etc. The more they are likely to be incorporated in our standards, and the better their quality. So simply put, inclusiveness is the key to excellence. And of course, for example, I'm going to pick on you, ANEC, of course, because you're here with me today, but your participation as ANEC in the CEN and CENELEC system has brought various success stories over the years regarding the inclusion of consumers' interest in our standards. I don't know if on the top of your head, you have something that you'd like to highlight, Chiara, in that sense.
Yes, thank you very much. We are active on several priorities, as I explained before. We have several success stories. One success story that I can mention is about child safety, and it is the standards that are used for testing the safety of lighters. And we were able to introduce the child-resistant lighters, where you need two hands to light your lighter instead of one hand, and this is considered child safe because below a certain age, children are not able to use only one hand. So it's a very practical example. It is a test method, but it is something that we develop thanks also to our members who are testing products, and with the help of laboratories that are telling us how technically we can improve the safety of products. We have done the same with the safety of domestic appliances for all consumers, so that consumers with disabilities, older consumers, can safely use the standards on domestic appliances, which in the past were not taking into account the safety needs of all consumers. So we can say that they were not inclusive.
Thank you so much. And I know that more success stories are on ANEC's websites, as well as actually on all ANEC's organization website. And also the video you mentioned at the beginning shows very clearly how ANEC participation has improved the inclusiveness of several standards. So thank you for highlighting this. At the beginning, I mentioned that we will also provide guidance about how you as experts, part of a TC, can help fostering an inclusive drafting process and drafting environments in general. Because indeed, as experts in a drafting committee, you have a role to play in nurturing those environments that allow equal participation of all interested parties. So Chiara, feel free to interrupt when you want to add anything, because you are actually wearing so many hats that you are also an expert in several TCs of CEN and CENELEC. So feel free to interrupt me at any time. I think the number one thing to remember, whether you're a TC secretary, a chair, or an expert, is of course the different rights and obligation of the different stakeholder categories within the system. So we just reminded you of the Annex III organization's rights. We also have all other recorded trainings about the rights and obligations of other stakeholders in our system. And I'm sure you're very, very familiar with all of the guides and the internal regulations that you have at your disposal. The number two reminder, I guess, is to actually make use of all the tools and the processes that are at your disposal to ensure the enhanced participation of all stakeholders. We've mentioned a bunch today. I went into detail into the guide 17 on SMEs, but that's just one. You also have Guide 25, again, an internal regulation part 2 specifically, which highlights the rights and obligation of Annex III organizations. You have the opinion mechanism, in which we have gone into detail, where the TC Secretary has a role to play to ensure the dissemination of the opinion and the consideration of the opinion as well. And I saw a couple of questions which we'll get back to at the end. Hold on to this. If an expert from an Annex II organization joins a TC, again, I mentioned it's without restriction. So as soon as they're requested to CCMC, we give them the access, we add them to the global directory, and we give them access to all the documents. So that's why they are not marked as a NSB or NC experts, because they do not belong to a country, but they represent the Annex organization, the European organization. Of course, you're all very familiar with the code of conduct of experts, so make sure to abide by it and follow all of the guidance there. Another important guideline to keep in mind is our guidelines on the new normal, which gives you strategies and tips on how to organize effective virtual, hybrid, or even face-to-face meetings. I don't know, Chiara, if you want to jump in here from your personal experience.
Yes, perhaps I can go back to the nomination or the appointment of experts that we do to TCs and working groups. Indeed, as a European stakeholder, we don't have a reference NSB or NC, and we don't have access to the global directory. It means that we contact CCMC, but also you as a technical body officer, to inform you about the appointment. This is sometimes creating some confusions because you think that we can directly appoint representatives like other NSPs or NCs, but this is not the case. So if you receive an email, you know that CCMC is going to act, but you are also to be informed about the nominations. We also have the possibility of nominating two representatives. One is the expert, the other is the member of the ANEC Secretariat. This is because we are an umbrella organization and we have experts coming from our national members. We are, from a practical point of view, we ask for double access. And then coming back to the meetings, the online meetings, being virtual, hybrid, on one hand, we see a very positive role because the resources needed to attend them are lower than a face-to-face meeting. So for smaller organizations, for NGOs, it is easier. On the other hand, we see also a multiplication of meetings. And this is more difficult in terms of human resources to cover, being for consumers, but also smaller NSBs. It's easy to have an online meeting. It can help in the consensus building, but there needs to be a balance in terms of human resources. To have meetings every 2 weeks sometimes is very ambitious. Although I know that most of the time those multiplication of meetings are also linked to calendars of development of standards, which are very strict, and the time available is very short. But still, I think it's important to have a balanced approach to how much people can develop and can produce in online meetings.
Thank you, Chiara, for adding this those practicals example. I think that my next point is partially going to answer one of the questions asking about balanced composition of TCs and diverse participation in TCs. As experts, and maybe more particularly as TC secretary or chair, You should really actively seek for participation of diverse expertise and profiles and aim for a balanced composition. So especially when you are starting a new work item, you should ask yourself, as a group as well, are they key players missing? Is there a balanced representation of profiles around the table? Are we going to develop a standard that could be useful for SMEs? Most likely, yes. Then do we have SMEs around the table? Is our product or service going to differently impact different gender, for example? And if so, do we have a gender responsive standardization expertise around the table? All of those questions are to ensure not only that everyone has a space and an opportunity to participate, but also that at the end of the day, your deliverable will be encompassing all of the needs and specificities of the different users that your product or your service might have. So we're speaking SMEs, women, consumer voice, environmental interest, standard users. So make sure to reach out to your national networks, your national organizations representing those interests. Also reach out to CCMC. As you know, we have an extended network of European partners, European liaison organizations that might be specifically specialized in either your sector or the type of stakeholders that you're looking to bridge the identified gaps. And then finally, ensure that equal opportunities for participation is respected. Indeed, consensus building is made with everyone involved. There you can ask yourself, is everyone given the same opportunities to participate? Chiara, you just mentioned the online participation and sometimes the multiplication of meetings, but also ask yourself, does anyone need anything specific to properly participate? Should we keep on our camera to help the people with, for example, hearing impairments? Are the timings always at the exact same time for each meeting? And does that mean that it's always the same experts that are excluded from the ability to participate? Or everyone given the same speaking time, or is someone systematically interrupted, etc., etc. So all of those questions to keep in mind to ensure that the drafting processes and the environments, not only in TCs and working groups, but on the day-to-day, ensure a inclusive and nice atmosphere to develop the best quality standards. In my next slide, I'm going a little bit away from purely the technical work because, as I said, European partners such as the Annex III organizations do not only provide input at technical level, but we're also very glad that they provide input at strategic and governing levels as well. So they were invited to the CEN and CENELEC General Assemblies, as I said, and they are also invited to participate in their respective working or advisory groups, of course, depending on the terms of reference. But that means that they have an observership in the joint policy groups, in many of our international task forces, in special networks that are created for specific issues, etc., etc., as well as the technical boards where they have observership. So of course, they do not have voting rights there, but they are allowed to formulate advice on current or future standard programs. They are invited to provide inputs for BT consideration, and they also have the right to lodge an appeal, although of course that's very limited to matters associated with the work carried out by those TCs to which they already participate. In addition to this, CCMC provides Annex III organization with continuous supports for all the operational aspects. We also provide trainings. We provide dedicated contact points within the CENELEC Management Center. We also have created two dedicated high-level groups, the SME working group on the one hand and the societal stakeholders group on the other hand, SSG. They were both created to lead the activities to raise awareness and facilitate the sharing of experiences among CEN and CENELEC members, as well as building links between different initiatives that are happening at national and European level that could be relevant for either SMEs or civil society on the other hand. And then, of course, we constantly collaborate on joint policy actions, on communication campaigns. We have a e-learning tool that I'm presenting in the next slide that we've developed together with the societal stakeholders. So that's ANEC, ETUC, and ECOS, which I recommend for all of you to go through. Maybe not if you've been in the CEN and CENELEC system for a while, but maybe you have young professionals in your team or in your TC as well. Feel free to recommend them to go through this. It really gives you a free, very easy to use online training that covers all the bases of the work, how we work, who we work with, and how we can get engaged and involved. So that's a really nice example of an action that we've done commonly with the Annex III organizations. In the next slide, you have a whole list of other types of actions and output that we have created together. Maybe the one that I'm going to highlight now is on the SME side. We have a LinkedIn dedicated pages, SMEs and standards. So if there are some of you from SMEs, feel free to join the LinkedIn page. The link is on the slide as well. And I think with that, we have reached the key takeaways, which Chiara, I will invite you to present.
Thank you very much. What have we learned today? Who are the Annex III organizations? There are 4 organizations, and they represent the interest of SMEs and societal stakeholders. Societal stakeholders are consumers, environment, and workers. So the Annex III organizations are ANEC, ECOS, ETUC, and SBS. The name Annex III comes from the standardization regulation. As Annex III organizations, we are also CENELEC European partners according to Guide 25. And we have some additional rights: the right to comment at the inquiry and formal vote level, the right of opinion, and to participate at the technical level in the working group. So we can appoint experts and also be observers in the technical committee. Inclusiveness, transparency, and openness of the system make better standards because diversity of views are expressed. There is a lot of material that CCMC has provided in order to foster the inclusive drafting of standards, to have processes that reflect the diversity of views, and when consensus has to be built, there is the possibility of taking into account all points of views according to the rules.
Thank you so much, Chiara. So now I see that we already have a couple of questions in the Q&A. So thank you so much, everyone. I think a lot of you will be for you, Chiara. So yes, prepare yourself.
I'm happy to go in order. So Adrian is asking, are the TC required to take the opinion into consideration, or can they ignore it? No, they can't ignore it as such. They should not ignore it as such, but they can. They are free in the follow-up of the opinion. Let's imagine that a standard has been approved, but the consumers or another societal stakeholders didn't support it for different kind of reasons. So the opinion is not favorable. In that sense, the TC could say, we note your opinion, however, the voting of the standard has shown a support. Your concerns will be taken into account in the revision of the standard, the next review of the standard. This is typically done with negative comments, and a not favorable opinion is de facto a negative comment. Then we have a clarification on what is the difference between an opinion and a general comment. And also, I will link it to the reply to the second question from Mathieu about the national level and the European level. So let's start from the beginning. European standards as a technical secretary of a TC. European, you are in charge of a TC. A TC is developing standards at the European level. These standards are commented upon and then voted upon. The comments and the vote are done at the national level so that the approval process takes into account the sum, the weighted sum, if we are into the approval of a EN, the weighted sum of the national positions. It means that at the national level, you need to take into account the diversity of the stakeholder participation. However, the national position at the end is one position. According to majority-minority rules and consensus rules, your national position won't say the industry support, the consumers do not support. Your national position is going to say yes or no. There might be comments. And if there is a substantial opposition of the consumers at the national level or another stakeholder, the national position can be and should be abstention. But it doesn't give the diversity of views. This is when you have a national mirror committee and a national position. We know that in several countries, there are no mirror committees, or if there are mirror committees, there is no diversity of views for different kinds of reasons, mainly lack of resources. So it means that it has been felt we needed to complement the national views with this opinion mechanism. And this opinion mechanism, as I mentioned, de facto is a positive or negative comment, but the terminology used is a terminology that wants to be constructive. Also, I think that it has been asked so the review phase, as I mentioned, the TC has to take into account the opinion and can be free on how the opinion is going to be taken into account, but it has to be acknowledged that an important part of the stakeholders and the users of the product of the service that is being standardized doesn't believe the standard is of good quality. So it's not a veto. It's not a review phase. I wouldn't call it like that. It's a diversity of view clearly presented compared to national positions where this diversity of views is not present and is not presented because it's a one position. I hope I've clarified. I'm happy to provide more examples in case I was not clear enough.
For me, it was clear. Thank you, Kara. But let's see if it comes back. Maybe to add to your last comment, it's not a review phase. It's not something in addition. It's very much in parallel. It's happening very much in parallel of the commenting phase at European level. So maybe that helps clarify. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yes, then we have this last question for the moment about the decision-making process. And indeed, there is an element of time and an element of speed. The magic word here is timeliness. So the time needed, the time it takes to develop a good standard in terms of diversity of views, but also quality, and the need from the market of the standard, which can be as soon as possible, but there is no point in having a bad standard available immediately, which will have a negative effect on the market.
Thank you, Kara. I think Else now needs to come in with the poll.
Yes, thank you very much, Chiara, for this valuable input, and Deborah, of course, as well. I would like to launch a small poll to our audience. The poll has 3 small questions asking their feedback about the webinar. So we use the replies to improve our webinars for the future, and that can only be a good sign, of course. So please take a moment to reply the questions. And of course, the other attendees, if they still have questions for either Deborah or Chiara, please feel free to use the Q&A. It's still open for you to submit your questions.
Thank you, Else. We have a lot of time left, so don't be shy with your questions. Oh, I can see we've done a very good job, Chiara. So well done. For those of you who were not so satisfied, feel free to also add comments so that we know what we should cover next time we do such a presentation. It's a presentation that we're very used to do, Chiara, of course. I think we do it at least once or twice a year, if not more sometimes. So maybe sometimes we get into a routine and we might forget to go into details for some things that are so familiar for us, but maybe not so much for the others.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all of you participating. Indeed, we are available for additional questions later on. Don't hesitate. Also, CENELEC organize many webinars. They will also do at the end of the year the technical bodies training in person, and some information, additional information will also be present there. The aim of today was to show that there are diversity of views, there are mechanisms to take them into account, and those mechanisms are not supposed to create more work, but once you know them, you are going to introduce them in your routine of work, and that was the aim of today.
Perfect summary, Chiara. Thank you. I think I don't see any more Q&A. They know how to reach out to us, so maybe we can close. Oh, wait. As I said that, Sandra. Good timing, Sandra. She's wondering if we can say a little bit more about what stage an opinion may be submitted.
Yes, it's going to be in parallel with the inquiry and the formal vote. So it's the two phases where there are national positions that are expressed, not only technical comments such as on a working draft, and those positions are going to be favorable or yes or no to the standard, in addition to the technical comments. And next to those comments and positions from the national level, there will be the societal stakeholder opinion on the same standards, in addition to the technical comments that we also submit.
Very clear, Chiara. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, both of you. No more questions in the Q&A. Oh, something pops up. Okay, now just Sandra thanking us. So I would like to thank, of course, Deborah and Chiara for this interesting overview and presentations, and all the attendees for joining us today. On the last slide, there is a little reminder about upcoming webinars. Well, there's only one before we go on summer break. It's a webinar for standard drafters about publications. If you are a standard drafter working in a CENELEC TC, that might be a useful webinar for you. And as Chiara mentioned, in December every year, we have the training also for TBO. So we will soon be informing you about the dates and a draft agenda. So thanks a lot, and see you hopefully next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.